Welcome everyone to the City of Aspen work session on this beautiful May day.
It's the other. Can you turn the other one?
With the microphones are working if I have two of them. Thank you. Welcome back. I've been away for a couple weeks. I'm really glad to have gotten away and even more glad to be back and see all these people and all the work that's gone on in the meantime. We're here today to talk about board and commission term limits, pretty specifically to the Kids First Advisory Board and the Wheeler Opera House Advisory Board. So issue that's raised as we've gone through these a number of times with board appointments. And then we have a couple other items. We're going to have our annual police report and questions, as well as police coordination with our parks on bicycle and bicycle safety. So we'll take it away. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Thank you, Grassroots TV.
Ready? Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. Nicole Henning, City Clerk, here speaking about Board and Commission term limits. We are bringing this to you in response to councilor comments. Council expressed some desire to explore term limits for boards and commissions. Okay. Council must keep in mind that with respect to permanent boards and commissions such as P&Z, BOA, HPC, and LLA, the charter precludes term limits. This can only be changed by a vote of the city electorate, and as you can see here, there shall be no limitation on the number of terms a member may serve on any permanent board or commission. Boards and commissions are created by ordinance, and the establishing ordinance varies by board. Just for reference, the clerk's office manages and maintains records for all boards and commissions, and there are 14 of them. We have not evaluated all 14 boards and commissions at this point to understand their rules governing reappointment and the filling of vacancies. For purposes of this discussion, we have chosen the two non-permanent boards that often have more applicants than open seats. Please keep in mind that several of our boards do not have enough applicants for the seats that are open, such as LLA and BOA. Because of this, we will look at the Wheeler Board and Kids First as examples. And now I'm going to turn it over to Kate to speak about the unique characteristics as to how each board is governed.
Thank you. Okay. First of all, I just want to point out there was an error in your memo. I think it said we had 26 boards and commissions. We only have 14. So
That makes me feel better.
Good to know. That's still quite a few for a city of our size. They all do a variety of things. As Nicole pointed out, for purposes of this discussion, we didn't go through all 14 of those. That would take quite a bit of time, so we focused on two. I think that we know there's sometimes to be more applicants than actual seats available. This slide is just created to give you an example. Every board you have, other than P&Z, HPC, and BOA and LLA, they're all in code. Otherwise, they're created by ordinance. They're created by council. And they're different depending on the board. So as an example, we pulled up two boards that were created by ordinance. In the ordinance, they were declared to be non-permanent, so they're not subject to the residency requirements. They're also not subject to the restriction on your ability to place term limits on them. The Kids First Advisory Board was created by ordinance number 16, series of 2020. It has 7 members, 2 alternate members. They serve 3 overlapping terms. You expressly declared this to be a non-permanent board, so again, you're outside of those restrictions imposed by section 8.2 of the charter. In this particular ordinance, you gave authority to the board to create bylaws, so long as they were not inconsistent with the ordinance. In this particular case, they presented to you bylaws that included provisions that regulated reappointment and vacancy. Talk a little bit more about that in the next slide. The Wheeler Board has been historically changed quite a bit. It was 9 members at one time. At one time, there was a youth member on it. Currently, it's 7 members, 1 alternate, and a non-voting ex officio seat appointed by the Aspen Music Festival and School. Again, it's declared to be non-permanent. They also have the power pursuant to the ordinance to adopt bylaws not inconsistent with the ordinance. The Wheelers bylaws are quite different than Kids First bylaws. They do not address reappointment, but they do address vacancy. And so, if you could switch to the next slide.
Yep.
I will say we created this just to start the discussion because you've often commented on the idea of term limits. If you want us to look at other boards, we're happy to bring those back to you. Again, this was just sort of a kickoff to see where council wanted to take this and what direction you wanted to give staff. And so with respect to this particular slide, this is kind of a repeat of the other ones. But one thing I did want to point out here is for Kids First Advisory Board, each member shall be appointed for a term of 3 years. The bylaws provide that after each 3-year term, a member will have the option to serve another 3-year term or rotate off the Kids First Advisory Board. These do not always come to you. So for instance, we're not publishing, Nicole is not every 3 years that somebody comes up, they only have to reapply. There is no requirement that they come back and be appointed by council. This is something you can change. It would require a change of the ordinance and/or a request to change the bylaws. You have the power, obviously, to change the bylaws as well, but it would probably be something best included in an ordinance amendment. The Wheeler Board has no such reappointment requirement, but it does speak to vacancies. And in general, both of these say that if a seat becomes vacant, the alternate can take that seat, and then council reappoints at the end of that term. You can either appoint the alternate to the full seat, or you can choose somebody else to serve in that full seat position, and the alternate may, depending on where the term is, go back to serving as an alternate. We only point this out simply to say that every board's different, and term limits are but one of the things you consider when you establish these boards. We can also address things such as replacement when there's a vacancy, and the term, if you want to see staggered terms instead of overlapping terms, in addition to the term limits. So.
And Kate, you had kind of pointed out, as I was kind of getting briefed, coming back to town and everything, that the Kids First Advisory Board, there's both no term limits, and they can reapply again and again without coming back to council. So someone could serve for 12, 16 years. And I'm not being critical. We're really lucky that some of these people are sticking around that long. But that it's not a matter of simply they don't have to reapply to or come into council, but they never have to come into council
It says
after the first appointment.
they will have the option to serve another 3-year term.
Yeah.
They don't come back to you. And this often gets brought up because Nicole's team takes these applications and keeps boards advised of when their terms are coming up. And so that's when we generally have these discussions with the clerk's office about those situations. It's unique with Kids First.
Okay.
And there may be a very good reason for that. Keep in mind that each board has an employee, a staff facilitator. And oftentimes, these bylaws are drafted with help and direction from that staff facilitator with the purposes of the board in mind.
Okay. Thank you.
So really, for this, we just wanted to open the door up for some discussion on term limits because you all have mentioned that on occasion. I really see two options for this. You can set a limit on the number of consecutive terms a board member may serve. We have that with city council. You can also, if you set a number of consecutive term limits, you can allow for a break and then an ability to reapply. How long you want to, whether it's 1 term or 2 terms before they can reapply is really a discretionary issue that's up to all of you. I gave you some examples there. I'll kick it back to Nicole to see if she has anything else she wants to say there. And there again, we're happy to take direction if you want to review other boards and commissions.
Okay. Thank you.
So yes, as you can see, the challenge in considering term limits is finding ways to balance knowledge with new ideas. As we see it, this is the first step in opening up the conversation for you guys. We are happy to look at other boards if council wishes, and we've also got Megan Monahan and Nancy Nichols is online, and Mike Harrington is here with the Wheeler if you have any questions for them.
Okay, thank you. I think it's fair to say this really came up in conjunction primarily with the Wheeler Board. I don't know if there was a little Kids First as well concerned with that, but it is a good example of the two separate boards. And we just continue to see some really talented people come in, as well as our existing talented currently serving members. And I've always felt a little awkward about how we advertise, because it doesn't really say that there's existing members who are going to reapply. It makes it sound like it's an open seat. And I don't know any cure for that, but that is something I try to explain to people. And just for board's information, I kind of asked, well, could we solve this by expanding the number of board seats at the Wheeler, or would that work or not? And it's pointed out that it starts to get really difficult to corral a single sense of opinion on things with you when you have an extremely large board, and EOTC might be a little bit of an example of that. So I would not be interested in that sort of aspect. Otherwise, this is an open discussion of the board, and I'll turn it over to board members for their thoughts and comments. I tend to think myself on Kids First, we should probably have people reapply after their second term and not have term limits, but at least have a chance to check in with council to ask, do you need new things? What have you noticed? What are the improvements? Where do you need help? But it's a good chance to really connect with those board members. So that's something I would look to, not to limit the number of terms on Kids First. We're kind of fortunate someone like Stefan Ravel has been willing to continue to serve. Sometimes we have parents who end up on other boards and then they can't serve any longer, or we end up with people kind of aging out of it as their kids move on to high school and they become more interested in the school district work. So we'll just open it up to talk, if anybody has comments on Kids First that they'd like to make, and then we can move on to Wheeler Board. And Christine, you served on that board, so maybe.
Yeah, I served on the Wheeler Board for 10 years, so I would have exceeded any term limits that we discussed setting tonight. But I would be curious to hear from Mike and Megan if you have any thoughts on this proposal and what might be the benefits or challenges you'd see from adjusting this at all.
Okay, well, let's do Kids First, and then we'll come back to you, Mike, when we go into the Wheeler.
Makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Hello, good afternoon. Thanks for inviting us here to weigh in. We did discuss this at our last board meeting in April with our board. And, you know, there's a lot of value to longevity and continuity in our board because there's so much knowledge that people bring when they've been with the board for a while. And it's hard to bring someone new on, or maybe 6 new people on, and get them all trained and educated in early childhood. And so there's a lot of benefits to that longevity and continuity to keep our projects moving along. Like you said, Rachel, having Stefan Ravel serve for a long period of time, and we have a number of board members who've been with us for a while. Like Kate said, our bylaws don't state any limit to terms, and our board basically agreed that at the end of the 6 years, members could go back to council, reapply to be reaffirmed, or interview for another 3 years. Sometimes we don't have applicants. I know people were saying it's a popular board. Just this last round in June, was it April?
Just this last one.
Just
in
June.
May.
In May, we didn't have any applicants, so we do have an open alternate seat. So sometimes we'll get 3 people apply, sometimes we don't get any. So it could be difficult to find people to apply if the board turns over frequently, and we just really want to encourage that continuity.
Okay. Perhaps both for all of us and the viewing public, what do we mean by overlapping terms versus, I mean, are they all 6 appointed at the original time, or are they, so there is some,
There's some staggering.
there's some staggering?
There
Okay,
is, yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
But unlike this board, depending on how and when they come on and off, it could be possible that you see all 6 come up at the same time. I think that's what you mean when we say overlapping.
Yeah,
It's really not going to be possible with like a board like council, where they're expressly staggered terms, meaning that 3 seats are up for election 1 year,
right.
the other 2 seats are up for election on alternating years. Yeah.
Okay, well, one other kind of thing I thought that would help in the future for us and for future councils, and it's a little more work for the staff liaison to each board, but would be to really put down next to the person's name, when were they first appointed and how many terms have they served already? And I just think that that would be very helpful. You look at a name and you don't know if it's been 8 years or 12 years or 16 years or, things like that. And it just is just more information for us to consider.
If I could, Mayor, I think Megan brought up a good point, which is in the past, council has had term limits, and this has gone back and forth several times in the history of city council here. We have had spells where we can't find qualified applicants. And if you have term limits, you have a good person on the board that's willing to serve again, but there's a term limit, it could create another opening where potentially there wouldn't be one if there were no term limits. So I think that's the counterbalancing point to maybe some of the good things that come with term limits. And I just wanted everybody to
Right. And it's something that you can write if you were renewing codes or the bylaws in such a way that an individual could continue to serve until there's been a reappointment of someone else.
Right.
So that, you could extend the term by months or however long, but it's not a nice position to leave someone in. I'll put it that way, especially if someone's really wanting to be off the board. So again, I was not talking about term limits on the Kids First Board. I don't see that as a critical element, but I do think we should at least get to a point of re-interviewing after 2 terms. Does anyone else have comments on those ideas or variations on a theme?
Well, I just wanted to say that, I think the reason why we're talking about this is, I'll just speak from my own experience, that at least Kids First and Wheeler Board, we have seen many applications and many qualified candidates, and it's never been in, I think, this council or any council's interest of not reappointing someone that's reapplying. So I do feel like there's people that don't necessarily apply for Kids First anymore because they know it's only reapplications that are going for it. So I think that's the problem that I would want to try to solve from this, because a lot of times someone comes and reapplies, you have amazing applicants, but you're just like, I'm going to reappoint the person that's been doing it for a while rather than put someone new on the board. And that's where the term limits take away the potential awkwardness of finally getting someone new in there. I don't think this is the council or Aspen's biggest issue by any means. I appreciate us working on it and trying to fine tune it. And I feel relatively agnostic about it, other than trying to find a happy medium of maybe it's not 2 terms, maybe it's 4 terms, maybe you get 12 years on these boards. And if no one else wants it, then so be it. But I do think there are a number of people here that have been on some of these boards for a really long time. And yeah, I think their institutional knowledge is incredible. I think they should have the ability after 3 years to come back. But the problem that I see again is reappointing people and never having these openings for the Christines of the world to get on the Wheeler Board, but you did somehow, which is, I feel like almost the luck of when you applied. I don't know. You can talk about that experience maybe, but from my experience, Wheeler and Kids First, there's just never been an opening, or you'd be at a Wheeler Board, Brian Weingarten, and have gotten lucky to apply when there actually was an opening.
Yeah.
and he was more than qualified, but it just doesn't feel like there's ever an opening on these boards, at least in my 3 years on this council.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And so you were saying you would prefer to do have some term limits on Kids First at a 4-term basis, and the potential language that if there are no applicants that have applied, and they can continue to serve until someone else is appointed to that seat?
Or try to make it known on these boards that that's the expectation. And that's up to future councils, but just saying, hey, you've been on this for 12 years now. It might be time to step off. This is no hard feelings, but you should have this expectation going into it if it doesn't need to be written in stone, just so there's, once again, I'm trying to avoid the awkwardness of not reappointing someone, not because they're not amicably qualified, but because it's just time to
Yeah, no,
get
and
someone new.
I'm agreeing with what you're saying.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, I think we also should have it so that they're not left without a quorum.
Absolutely.
Because X many people were out and not enough applicants came in
Yeah,
at the same
yeah.
time, so. Okay. Bill, you had your?
Yeah, thanks. I think I share almost everything that Sam just said, if not everything. I'm super grateful for people who dedicate their time and efforts to volunteering on these boards, but I also think it's critical that we bring in fresh viewpoints. For both of these boards, I'd be supportive of I'd much rather see 2 or 3 terms as the maximum. I think that mandatory reappointments and interviews by council are of critical importance. I was not aware that that wasn't a requirement. I'm very grateful that Kate pointed that out, but I think that that needs to end from my perspective. And just to add a little bit of color in terms of Kids First, for example, most families and most parents, certainly not all, but most, have a short window where their kids are under the purview of Kids First services. And someone who's been away from that period of life for a while may not know what's best for that program at that point in time. And so that's why I think Stefan is sort of the anomaly in that situation, I think. But I think it's critical that we have people that are bringing fresh perspectives and current experiences and real-time feedback to these boards. And Kids First is the easiest for me to exemplify there. But I'm very supportive of term limits here. I'm super grateful. My solution to not wanting to leave a board with vacant seats would be some kind of provision that says if after 2 rounds of advertising for open seats, if there haven't been any qualified applicants, then you can revisit someone who is termed out. I think would be a reasonable and fair way to do that. So that's what I'd suggest for everyone to contemplate. And then I want to make it clear that just because you're termed out doesn't mean you can never apply for that board again. You just have to sit 1 term out.
Just 1 term. Okay, that was the other one I was going to be polling on. So 1 term out for you to both. And right now, Sam, you're at 4. And of course, we can change from here. And Bill is at 3 terms.
2 to 3, yeah.
2 to 3. Okay.
That'd be my preference.
Okay.
Thanks.
2 or 3. And then at this side of the table, John?
Yeah, I think term limits are important. I also think institutional knowledge is as well, and that's, I think Stefan Reveal is a great example of that. I also agree with Sam. I don't think this is the most pressing problem we have in front of us right now, but we're making an effort to do this because we have been turning away qualified people from board appointments. So with that said, I would support 3 term limits, again, with a gap of 3 years between serving again.
With a one-year gap. Okay, that's really good. That's very good. And Christine, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's an elegant solution. We're all appreciative of the benefit that longstanding volunteers provide to this community and the expertise, but can agree that it's healthy to have some turnover and new perspective. So I'd be supportive of that. I do also support having Kids First reapply upon every term limit expiring. I wasn't aware that they weren't either. I also just think it's nice to hear from people sitting in that seat, and those interviews give us a chance to do that. So I would like to see that change as well. And then I've said this before, but I would like, this is just wider board and commission comment, but people who apply in the original process and are not selected, that we could go back to them and offer them vacant seats when those come up so that they aren't having to reapply every 6 months and kind of track those board and commission seats. I know that's creates some extra work. In
But
the
it should be
clerk's
for the
office, but-
department head of the board who's working with it, not that all will have to fall on Nicole to do, but I think that that's a good comment as well. So, and one term out in between being able to reapply to come back to a board.
I have one more comment, Ted, if you
Yeah,
don't mind,
please.
Rachel. I'd love for this to be written, whether it's ordinance or bylaw change or both, in such a way that it's applicable to all current board members too. This isn't only for new board members.
So you kind of want to make it retroactive?
Yes. Yes. I want to make sure that
I'm not as clear about that
I think you could start it, so
with new appointments.
No, to be clear, I don't want to kick anyone off who's currently serving, but as their terms come to an end,
that's when it would start to, so if their term came to an end, and you were to reapply, they would be now subject to this rule.
that's my preference, yes.
Okay.
Okay. And I was going to say, I like your creative language on how to allow someone to reapply if no one else. I don't know if I'd use the term qualified versus, unappointed by council or,
That's what I meant,
whatever.
yeah.
But yeah, I know that's
Thanks
what you
for
meant.
clarifying.
But I don't want someone to think we classifying them a certain way. Okay, so that kind of comes to a conclusion that most of us are okay with 3 terms as opposed to 4 as a maximum that you can serve before having to take a timeout. And it would be a 1-term timeout depending on the term of the board. Some are 3, some are 4. And we're going to start tracking the data more carefully of when people were first appointed, and perhaps how many terms they've served, or the date of each term they've started, something like that. And then the final was your last comment, Christine.
Revisiting previous applicants to see.
Finding a way to see if they're still interested, to be contacted first. I think it's going to be important to find out if the majority of council wanted to reappoint those people before they're contacted, because I'd hate to contact someone who applied, who didn't really have a lot of council support, and them think they have an automatic.
Yeah.
So it would be making sure we're contacting them, not anything automatic. Sam?
And just saying what you said earlier about not having unnecessary vacancies, just so people could stay on if there was.
I think that's what Bill's language would cover.
Okay,
better
I just
than
want to make
mine.
sure. And then, I don't know if you're again, I would love to hear from Mike just before anything is fully set in stone in this
No,
conversation.
I realize that we kind of jumped from
Yeah.
kids first with people's comments, and I was about to do that. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
And I would make one other kind of comment. What really was interesting to me about an individual who's given so much, like Stefan Reveal, is he was so seeped in Kids First in those programs that when the ability to run for a board seat on the Early Childhood Education Committee that we're now funding with a 1/4 cent of sales tax, he stepped up to the plate to do that. And that's a lot. That's a lot of commitment, and it needs to really be appreciated. And I think we all felt really good that it wasn't just an anonymous name on the ballot of who should be our appointee for this, who had no history with Kids First or no interest in Kids First. And so, again, special thanks there. I really think that mattered. Mike, you want to come on up for a minute, and we'll
Thank you.
hear a little of your thoughts? And thank you, Megan.
So hi, everybody. Mike Harrington, Wheeler Executive Director. I don't want to disappoint. I don't have real strong opinions on the topic. I think there's pros and cons to both longevity and fresh energy. I think the makeup of the Wheeler board, which is what I can speak to directly, is excellent. Right now, we have a great blend of folks that have both been on the board for a while, that bring community experience, that bring a lot of historical expertise, and as well as industry or kind of arts-specific experience. So that's a great group. I did make 2 notes here, though, as part of this conversation that I'll just
Please.
maybe reiterate or ask a question around. While the reappointment to the Wheeler Board is not automatic or at the discretion of the board member, as it is with Kids First per that ordinance, it does seem like there's kind of an unwritten rule that Wheeler board members get up here if they've expressed an interest in sticking around. That seems to just be automatic.
I don't think it's an unwritten rule anywhere. I think what Sam is alluding to and others is feeling this kind of double bind that, we'd like some new blood, but at the same time, you want to reward someone who has served and given their time. And so how do you not insult the person who you need to let go to bring in the new blood? And whether it's for this council, but I think it's much more for future councils, the operation was a little more automatic then that's more, it's not a rule, but it tends to happen that way unless there's been something really egregious.
Sure. So term limits are intended to help protect council from having to make that kind of decision.
Well, in a way, but also to let other people know that there really are openings. I mean, at this point, when we advertise 2 seats on the housing board or 3 seats on the parks and open space, and the same people come in to reapply, I'm reapplying, but 2 new people have come into the room, and you have to tell them, by the way, there's somebody who served for 8 years now, and they're reapplying, and you're competing with them. It's not a true opening in that sense that it's like a vacated seat in an open election. It's that somebody already has it, and they want it back. And so it's become awkward.
Sure. And again, I don't know if this is intended to be a conversation. Apologies if it's not. But in this last round of interviews for the Wheeler Board, that was the case. There was one gentleman, I can't remember his name, but he has applied a couple of times, and every time has been up against incumbents. I don't have a strong opinion about him or his background or his thoughts, but term limits wouldn't necessarily protect the council from that issue.
No, you're absolutely right. If they were just reapplying within their set of 3 terms, council would have that same challenge. You've already put 4 years in. I've just got my feet underneath me. Please reappoint me. And so it's more, I think, leaning towards people who've been on a board for 20 years, 24 years, and are unwilling to let someone else bring new energy.
Sure. Great. And then my second question was going to be kind of along those lines and to the point that Bill mentioned and that Kate responded to with the we have a lot of long-standing Wheeler board members currently.
Yes.
So do they start at 0 when they go to reapply, or otherwise we could be looking at a complete turnover of the Wheeler board, which I don't think would be a good thing.
My understanding, and I can confirm this through some research, would be, for instance, if you reappoint somebody, which there's some up for reappointment tomorrow, we probably will not have the ordinance in place before that appointment. When the ordinance is in place and you had somebody that was serving on the board, ask for reappointment after the effective date of the new ordinance that set a term limit, you could apply the term limits based upon that reappointment. So by reappointing, they're now subject to the new law that took effect prior to their appointment that talks about the number of terms they could serve, if that makes sense. It may cause, though, some of your members, because you have several that will probably be term limited upon reappointment, and if those appointments line up, you could be faced with a situation where you have 4 people that hit that term limit around the same time.
Right.
I'm really glad you brought that up. That's an interesting dilemma. And it gets back a little bit to some of the information, and we'd get it in the interview packets of how many, the other board member names and when their terms will be over or not. So there might be a little chance for renewal, but you could think of conditioning that further to say that no more than two, this applies to no more than 2 seats in any given one-year cycle, or something like that, so you don't have 6 people gone at once. You could, I'd let that be massaged or think about it a little bit, but maybe there's a way that, both council has not an out, but has an ability to say, okay, we have 4 people reapplying for 4 seats. We do not want 4 freshmen at the same class. And the 2 of these people will be reappointed even though they're now exceeding their term, and we'll bring in 2 new seats. Just something to think about how we might be able to protect from that outcome of, I think it's absolutely right. You don't want to have a whole new 7-person board at one time.
I can look into that. It's going to take a little bit of thought.
It's going to take some thought so that we can see. Anybody else have comments on that or other comments for Mike?
I mean, a theoretically simple way to handle it could be a one-time thing that says, in the first sort of enactment of this
Application.
ordinance, no more than X number of seats can be termed out. How you determine which of the people, I don't really
That
know.
would
Maybe
come
it's
up to
by
the
lottery or
council.
something like that, or to the council, but maybe it's something like that. But, if it's 2 or 3 people of a 7-person board, I'm not worried about that at all. If it's 5 of the 7, that's a problem.
Well, or if it's 3 now and 3 more 3 months from now, it could still line up to be a lot of totally freshmen at the same time.
Yeah.
So this is a work session to kind of work through possibilities and really look at the scenario. So there's nothing hard and fast. It will come back via an ordinance. But Mike, did you have other comments for us or any questions? I think you said 2 things there.
I think I covered both. I'll just reiterate, I think the makeup of the Wheeler Board currently is wonderful. It's excellent. And we really appreciate the interest from the community in wanting to serve on that board. I know we've been fortunate kind of with a high number of applicants recently, and that's a great problem to have. I'd love to keep it as a problem, though, because I think ultimately people will stop applying if it's always incumbents.
The one thing I think that we've talked about a few times, or I know I've talked about a few times, is it would be great if the Wheeler Board could hold some events for people to come and give comments and talk about and think about, so that maybe, again, some of these applicants who've not been appointed but had a lot of skills have a venue to say, hey, have you guys ever thought about doing this, or have you ever thought about doing that, and find a more deliberate way of getting the best of the best from our community with ideas and inputs, and maybe it would create a little more understanding of people, of what the Wheeler does and how they can attend board meetings if they'd like to. They're public meetings, things like that.
That's what I was just going to use this as an opportunity to remind folks. They are public meetings. They're the second Wednesday of every month at, I think it's 3 p.m.
Yeah.
We'd love to have lots of people there.
Yeah, but again, you go to a meeting and there's already a set agenda, you have things to talk about. I'm talking about, can you add something on that would be something that the Wheeler Board invites people to come in and just talk and share ideas. It's not as if it's the standard agenda. Maybe it's not at lunch at noon. Just do something to see how you and the Wheeler Board can involve other ideas and people to feel listened to.
Sure, I'll pass that along.
Okay, thank you. And does anyone else have any comments, or we kind of covered that one? Then we'll move on to the next item.
I do have a question.
Okay.
We talked about 2 boards tonight. Are there any other boards you'd like to examine to look at whether term limits make sense? Yeah, Sam's shaking his head.
None that I know of.
Okay.
And I think the other boards that are permanent boards would require a city charter change and a vote.
But as I said, there's 14 of them. I think there's probably a handful more that would be non-permanent in nature. I don't know if CCLC, there's some other types of boards. We haven't really done that evaluation. But if you want us to look at others, please let us know, and we're happy to kind of evaluate.
Okay, I had no other boards in my mind. Did anybody else have a board? And we can feed that information to Kate and Pete later if it comes up. But
that's
Christine?
I don't have any other boards in mind, but I do think that some consistency, more consistency across the boards is goal to strive for, just for the sake of having it, that continuity. And again, I think that some turnover is healthy for a board, an advisory board, especially in this community. So I won't push for it now, but I do think it's something to kind of keep an eye on.
Thank you. Very good.
In part, we can start here and continue to evaluate and report back with progress and potentially look at other boards and commissions along the way
And the department heads who are managing those boards.
and receive their feedback, the liaisons, the department managers too. I did want to make a plug for Aspen 360. So we do talk about our boards and commissions within that program where applications go out, and we invite community members to join Aspen 360, the program, to come learn about your government. It starts in the near future. So that's definitely a funnel and pipeline for boards and commissions.
Okay, great. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so now we have a presentation by Kim. That's a very well-prepared report.
Let's see. Okay, come over here and help me. Oh, did it get me out? No, I think I'm still in it right here. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor Richards and council members. Thank you for having me today. I'm Kim Ferber, your police chief. I'm here today to walk you through the City of Aspen Police Department 2025 annual report and also share an update on our license plate reader program. We had a really meaningful year, and I'm excited to share some of these highlights with you. So to kick things off, our 2025 vision was built around 3 pillars. First, delivering excellent customer service through trust and transparency. Second, increasing departmental efficiencies through process improvements and innovation. And third, increasing our operational readiness across the board. These weren't just words on a wall or in a software platform. They guided every decision we made this past year, from how we staffed events to how we invested in our people. I've been really intentional about making these values show up in our day-to-day work, not just our planning documents. Let's talk about community engagement, because this is the heart of where our department really shines. In 2025, our officers and staff members attended more than 30 community events. We also logged more than 1,572 foot patrol hours and 199 hours of bicycle patrols. And that bike patrol number is a 67% increase over 2024, which we're really proud of. The idea here is really simple. Visibility matters. When our officers are out walking downtown, riding bikes on the trails, showing up at neighborhood events, that's how you build trust. People get to know us as people and not as badges. And that connection pays dividends when it really counts. On the operational side, our advanced response team had a really strong year. This team supports critical operations and provides specialized training to our staff, so we're ready for whatever comes our way. We're also prioritizing both the mental and physical well-being of our officers. We received over $40,000 in grant funding that allowed us to expand officer and family wellness resources, including 120 counseling sessions and our Fit Force training. Our philosophy here is pretty simple, straightforward. We take care of ourselves so we can take care of you. We can't ask our officers to show up at their best for this community if we're not investing in their health and resilience. The next one is a big one for us, accreditation. We're working toward accreditation through the Colorado Association of Chiefs of Police, and we're holding ourselves to the highest law enforcement standards. This process is about strengthening our policies and reducing risk. At the end of 2025, we completed about 55% of our internal procedures review. That might not sound flashy, but what it means is that we're systematically going through every policy, every procedure, and making sure it meets best practice standards. Our message is simple. You have high standards, and so do we. Speaking of standards, our training. We're not just meeting the minimum here. We're exceeding state mandated training requirements, increasing skills across the department, staying informed about legislative changes as they happen, and preparing for high-risk situations. Training isn't something we check a box on once a year. It's continuous. Our officers are constantly learning, adapting, and getting better. That's how we stay ahead of the curve and keep this community safe. Two highlights here. First, our digital forensic capabilities have grown significantly. We conducted 66 forensic examinations and processed 20 terabytes of digital data in 2025. We're now available as a resource regionally, which means other agencies in the area can lean on our area of expertise. We also increased our investigative capabilities, and we provided community education around digital safety. Equally important, our e-bike safety initiative you're going to hear more about later tonight. Our officers made 419 citizen contacts during 162 hours of dedicated e-bike safety patrols. The biggest issue, riding on the pedestrian mall, which accounted for about 48% of our contacts. We also addressed pathway usage, stop sign violations, and speeding. This is about keeping everyone safe, riders and pedestrians alike.
Kim, can I ask you, because citations are mentioned in the program, how many bike violation citations were issued?
We did not issue any bicycle violations last year.
Thank you.
Mental health is something we care deeply about, and 2025 was a year where we really leaned into prevention. Our PACT program, that's our co-responder model, handled 116 referrals and responded to 777 behavioral health calls. But here's something I'm especially proud of. Braulio, our human service officer, connected community members to hands-on wildfire mitigation work as part of our outreach. This initiative reflects something we believe deeply, that strong communities built by investing in both people and places. It's just not about responding to crises, it's about helping people find purpose and connection. Oh, excuse me. So you spoke and we listened. West End residents raised concerns about traffic safety, and we responded with a dedicated traffic pilot program that ran from August 25th through October 30th. Our traffic officer conducted 350 traffic stops and issued 168 traffic citations during that period. This was about showing our community that when they bring concerns to us, we act on them. The pilot gave us great data and helped us understand what a more permanent traffic enforcement presence could look like. Emergency preparedness is something we've been investing in heavily. We reinforced agency partnerships, enhanced first responder training standards, implemented and developed a new communications plan, and adopted new emergency alert technology. And we brought the community along with us. More than 100 Aspen residents joined our Ready and Resilient event to learn more about assembling a household goal bag, signing up for emergency alerts, developing a household checklist, and getting wildfire mitigation tips. Remember, Ready, Set, Go has replaced pre-evacuation and evacuation language previously being used. Here, let me give you the quick number snapshot. In 2025, thefts decreased, total crashes decreased, total calls for service remained fairly stable. Those are all really positive trends. Total arrests did increase, and that reflects our officers being more proactive and engaged, not necessarily a rise in crime. Destruction of property decreased, which is good news. The one area of concern is domestic violence. which increased. This is something we're watching closely and working with our partners and local advocacy organizations to address. A quick note, I just learned our data analyst made a minor error in reporting the data. This is being corrected now. However, it's important to note that that did not change any of the positive trends that we're seeing. And of course, none of this happens without the team. So this is the group right here, about 40 officers and staff who show up every day for this community. I couldn't be more proud of the team. Aspen, it's truly our honor to serve you. And finally, I want to just take a quick moment to recognize some of our outstanding team members. So here we have our Employee of the Year, Lauren Turner, along with several staff who went above and beyond in 2025. These folks represent the best of what our department has to offer: dedication, professionalism, and a genuine love for this community. That wraps up that 2025 annual report overview. Thank you for your time. I also want to thank you for your continued support. I'm happy to take questions, and also we can dive into the license plate reader program update whenever you're ready.
Okay, well, let's take questions or comments on the first part and then dive into that. Bill?
Happy to start. Thanks. Thank you, Kim, for that update. All wonderful news. I appreciate it. Of course, the domestic violence thing is troubling, but I imagine it's a relatively small sample set, so a couple of instances in one year versus another can show a trend that hopefully isn't long-term. Is that accurate?
Yes,
Okay.
agreed. I would say not knowing exactly what's happening in the family home situation makes those very challenging for us, but I think it would be speculation just to wonder exactly what's causing it, but I don't see it as a significant change in the numbers.
Great. In a recent meeting with you, I commended you on all the great work that you're doing. Nothing has changed from my perspective on that. I've definitely noticed a difference in the behavior and the experience from some of the transient population that we have, and the impact that it's having on our community is improving, and I really appreciate all of your efforts in that. I think that continued strong enforcement in the West End is critical. I don't want to hear about a injury or worse that results from bad behavior there. So until we sort of improve traffic flow on 82, I think we have to invest the resources in making sure people drive safely and behave safely. So I think that's our responsibility to do that, and I support that fully. Curious if you made a decision on your assistant chief. I think that's
We're going to hear from one of the acting assistant chiefs tonight, and
Great.
so haven't made a decision yet. I anticipate making one in October.
great.
And thank you also for the other feedback on those. I think we have really put some great strategies in place that are helping mitigate some of the issues that you're talking about, especially down in the core area. The team has responded really greatly to those changes. And then I think the other piece that I would just mention is that we have been working with Pete to talk about also implementation again of some of the traffic strategies in the West End to help support the community there again.
Great. And then on one last comment, on bike stuff, I was thinking that maybe we try to find, and you probably know this, we try to find like where the harm's happening. Like, are there collisions? Are there people getting injured? And what are those specific circumstances? And we put our efforts in enforcement and education into those specific things rather than trying to sort of tackle a beast that where we're not really going to make too much of an impact. I know that's a little nebulous what I'm saying, but to exemplify it, if we notice that like the majority of incidents that you're hearing about, injuries or collisions or whatever, are happening, as people are coming off trails onto the streets or something like that, then that's where we should really put our efforts and our resources.
Thank you. I couldn't have asked for a better segue for the next presentation. We're going to talk about some of those things specifically and some of the data-driven decisions we're making.
Perfect. Thanks.
Yeah, do you have any comments or other comments or questions?
Yeah, I wanted to say that I'm really grateful for the bike patrols and the foot patrolling that goes on. I think that's really, anytime a person sees a policeman, they're going to slow down. whether they're on a bike or in a car. And I noticed that the West End traffic stops, which I'm also grateful for because it's been such a hot topic here at this table. I noticed that roughly half of the West End traffic stops did get citations, and the bike stops got none. Is there something in place so if they offend a second time that they will get a ticket?
Yeah, that's a great question. I will say historically, the culture of the police department has been to really lean into education. And we have really worked as a team to identify when it's appropriate to issue someone a summons. And so for repeat violations, I think it's important to do that. I think the pilot program last year, the traffic pilot program, was very enlightening for some of the team members. They saw such great results. They really saw a change in driving behavior in the West End. So I think for our team, I think that was also educational. And it's the same thing that we're trying to do with the e-bike campaign is I think the officers struggle with those contacts because they're fairly minor violations, and yet there are times if the behavior is egregious or if it's repetitive that we want to lean into the enforcement.
Yeah, I understand. And that's why we've got, I think, one of the most admirable police departments in the country is because of that stance and you know, tourist-friendly and educating people instead of incarcerating them.
Yeah, thank you for that. And it's a really fine balance, and we don't want that scale to tip the opposite direction either. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Christine?
Yeah, thanks for all of this information. I think the co-responder program is really commendable. I hear great feedback about that from both law enforcement and community members. It's notable that there's no wildlife calls on here. I don't want to speak for you, but I learned in Aspen 360 that we hired a dedicated wildlife officer, and so I assume that some of that has been shifted specifically to one person instead of having all of our officers respond to wildlife calls, and that's noted in this. Is that correct?
Yes, so there was a change a couple years ago. So our community response team that's led by Jenna, who's sitting right over here. She's going to be up here in a minute. They do respond to a lot of the animal calls, and we also respond to the bear calls when there's concern about safety with the bears. But a couple of years ago, someone that worked for us was hired over to Parks, and we shifted all of the bear response to the Parks team. And so I believe Laura is collecting data exactly, especially on the bear specific. I can come back and give you some data on, a little bit more data on like animal contacts if you want, or how much time we're spending on those, if you'd like that.
I don't need it necessarily, but it's always interesting to hear about that unique part of our community.
Yeah, yes, thank you.
One question on the West End numbers. We have numbers in the number of citations and stops. Is there any way, or is it too soon in the information to tell if there's been any behavior change in terms of traffic patterns in and out of the West End because of some of this attention there?
I think it would, I don't think that I can speak to that. I think it would be a little bit of a speculation, but I can tell you from the officer who worked that assignment last year, he was able to note that he was able to like observe the changes. But I don't know that I could actually give you any data around that. I might be able to check with engineering to see. I think it's more anecdotally what we experience, like more of the experience piece.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, just on a couple of those topics, for me, we did a West End pilot program, and I think that was well received and good information, but it kind of becomes a pilot program is supposed to lead to something else, to something permanent.
Yes.
And so the question is kind of becoming now what? And maybe you'll have to wait till we have a little more reports and information back from Jacobs. I have noticed people kind of saying that, well, wait a second, now we just got an officer in a car sitting up by the Forest Service corner blockade to keep people from coming there, but they're really not in the West End or paying attention to the West End anymore. And so I just had to pass that along, that it's, all the people driving too fast are the ones cutting through all the side streets to get to Power Plant Road, whereas, maybe people do ride around the blockade every now and then, but it seems that you have the officers at the blockade and not where the real traffic is now that the pilot program's over. So I would just like to kind of look into that. And, you know, as I've told you, if you need more manpower to be able to do all that we're asking for anymore, you need to just let us know. And we'll have your back the way you have your department's back. I think that's
Appreciate that.
the right way to go. I am concerned about bike safety, perhaps more than I'm hearing, because I see so many bikes now just running stop signs, not rolling a stop sign, not having the right of way, cars on Highway 82 by, say, City Market or Main Street, and it's their turn to go, but bikes just run right through all the time. And, you know, you get a little nervous about, my eyesight's not as good as it used to be at 65, but at night, bikes with no lights on at night, you know, going in the wrong direction, and it's just, it may just be a few people who are doing this, and I realize there is this connection that with parks and open space that are in our back here for a little further conversation. But I'd love to see us if we could require our bike shops to have a tag on their bike so that you can say, this was bike number A45, and look, it was rented to Mr. and Mr. So-and-so, and your child is not using that electric bike appropriately, and that we have a way to track this, and that bikes should have some sort of identifier on. And I've honestly dealt with this issue through state Colorado Counties, Inc., where they're dealing with the issues on the roads, and through RAFTA, where we hear about some very serious injuries of people who've been hit by a heavy, fast e-bike on the Rio Grande Trail, have gone through multiple surgeries now, and they're like, well, the rangers don't have an ability to stop somebody and ask them for a driver's license. They don't have to. They can just drive away. They don't have to, you know, there's no ability. And so I'm really kind of wondering about the intersection between our parks, you know, managing on the Rio Grande Trail and other trails, and they find a violator and they're a mile down, and they have to call then a police officer to be able to come in to actually demand your information, your license plate, your this, and they have no authority to detain someone to say, no, you have to wait here until a police officer comes because you've just injured this person. And so it just feels like there's gaps that I'd still like to find us a way to address. And you know, a citizen who calls you should be able to say, yeah, that bike just hit me, and it was said it was A25 on the license plate. You know, what can you do with that? As opposed to right now, it's like it was just a bike, and you can't tell whose bike, who rented it, did they sign a waiver, were they really fully educated about the rules of the road, because they're supposed to have signed something that they are going to follow our bike safety rules. So I totally appreciate the approach of you know, friendly contact and education and everything like this. But for some people, that just means anything goes. There's really no consequences. And it only takes a few bad apples to spoil the whole barrel or to actually injure a few people. And I just don't, you know, you see the example being set by the one hotshot who runs the stop sign, and then the three kids on the bike say, well, I guess I can do that too. You know, I don't really have to just roll the stop or give the right of way, or do the younger kids on a bike really even know who has a right of way at an intersection? And I do worry about that. So I believe in the education and respect that we give to people, but I also think there needs to be more accountability that potentially leads to consequences. And it's just a public safety issue I'm really worried about, and I needed to pass that along.
Thank you.
And along with that is the helmets at the skate park, because everyone is supposed to have a helmet, and you have a few hot shots, I don't need a helmet, and then suddenly you have a 9 and 10-year-old saying, I don't need to wear my helmet. And my son's life was saved by a helmet on a bicycle accident quite a while ago, but I worry about the city liability of having someone break their neck down there or crack their head open and not have then be able to say, well, no one ever told me I had to, or just have this, you may have a little sign posted, but if we're not enforcing it, it can be kind of like, well, the city doesn't really care. And that creates liability for all of us. So whether it's the police or whether it's parks people or whether it's other civilian type of civil discussions, we need to make sure that the skate park people are wearing their helmets.
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate your feedback on all of those.
Thank you for your hard work.
Yeah,
Appreciate
thank you.
it.
I hope that in the next presentation, we can touch on several of the things that you brought up around the e-bike safety and some of the new things that we're going to do this year that I think will help to make some improvements that you're mentioning. And I do anticipate that you'll see a request coming forward this year for potentially moving that traffic pilot position into a FTE if there's support from Pete and the city.
Appreciate that so much. Actually, one last thing is that we didn't touch on your emergency evacuation team or emergency response team. And I think that what has come together with the fire council, the fire district, yourselves, the sheriffs, it's really amazing. And it's going to be so critical this summer. I continue to be a little concerned about how are we getting information to our hotel guests and our guests about, you could get a call to evacuate at any time while you're here on vacation. No, you can't bring your suitcase. How do we let these people know what may be a preparation, not just please don't consume too much water, but that, it's just an area and obviously it has hurricane or tornado issues. So almost every building was posted with this is the route to evacuation. And we never even used the words evacuation in Aspen in any sort of real sense. Or that people would see it and feel, oh my gosh, that might actually be something I'm called on to do while I'm here. How do I connect with my wife's over here and the kids in the day camp and this and that? And that's a guess. Maybe our parents, our locals are starting to really think that way. But how do we reach this changing audience every week and a half?
Yep, I appreciate that. We're going to touch on some of that at the upcoming council retreat. I have a couple minutes to spend with you that evening while you're eating dinner. I'll be sure to implement something on that to talk about it. I think that outreach is important. And I think that we have some really great tools now that we're using that if you have a cell phone and you come into a geo area, that you're going to be receiving those notifications. But I also think the education around it is very important, to your point.
Great. Thank you so much.
Shall we jump into a quick update on license plate reader technology?
Yes.
Excellent. I want to start by saying that I have had a really great opportunity to receive from positive feedback from some of the community members and also some of our business owners in the core who are excited to have us utilize the license plate reader technology here in Aspen. And I also have received some feedback about concerns about utilizing this technology in our community. And Richie Zaw, who's my acting operations chief, and I took the opportunity to meet with 3 citizens who had expressed some concerns around this technology. We had a really productive conversation, and I think at the end of it, they were very pleased with the direction that we were going in terms of our implementation strategy. And so I wanted to let you know you may have received some of the feedback that was more concerning, but I did want to let you know that there has been some really positive responses to me as well. So here, just a quick definition. Automated license plate readers are high-speed, computer-controlled camera systems that are typically mounted on street poles, street lights, highway overpasses, mobile trailers, or attached to police squad cars. On the right of the screen there is a photograph of one of our VMS signs. We do have 2 license plate readers that are not operational right now. They are mounted to 2 of our VMS signs. That's how we ordered them.
Variable message sign?
Yes, yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
The images that are being taken include the rear of the vehicle and the rear license plate only. They are not designed to capture images of the driver. The reason that it doesn't take photographs of the front of the vehicle is many states do not require for a driver's, a license plate to be mounted on the front of the vehicle. Our data is locally owned. It will only be retained for 30 days. unless there is, unless there becomes evidence that one of the pictures is related to a crime that occurred in our city. And we will only share this data with other Colorado law enforcement agencies if they request it. So what that means is it won't be searchable by other law enforcement agencies. If they believe a suspect vehicle drove past one of our license plate readers, they will reach out to one of our police officers. We will do the search criteria once we know what they need it for, and then we will provide them information back. I want to talk about a few of our local successes, because I think they've made really significant impacts for some of our victims in the community. So first, we had a hit and run spree, and we utilized Down Valley license plate reader technology to identify a suspect vehicle. We also had a fatal crash. We used the data to confirm timelines and also the driver statements. We had a kidnapping and a very serious felony assault, and the use of the license plate readers helped us to return the child back to Aspen safely. And then we utilized license plate reader technology all the way to the I-70 corridor to help us identify and apprehend 4 suspects who burglarized several downtown businesses.
Thank you.
Happy to answer any questions about this technology.
Well, just for the record, this is not accessible by ICE.
Correct. You have the ability to set it so that it's open to searches nationally by law enforcement. You have the ability to open it up to have Colorado law enforcement search. That's how we've been able to use this technology, is because other agencies are allowing us to search their data. Or you could limit it to only your department can search your data, and then we could share it with other agencies that might seek out. That would be my goal ultimately, is to be able to share it with other law enforcement agencies across Colorado. But I think starting it off right now at just the local level, I think is important for our community.
Yeah, I think that's very important, because although Colorado has laws, I believe, against local police and enforcement agencies working with ICE, there have been some police departments that have been sharing data, or sheriff's departments, with ICE, and that's a violation of law in Colorado.
That's correct.
Thank you. So I
Thank
think
you.
that's a very important component.
Thank you.
Bill?
Thanks. Is there a way to make sure that these records are only accessible for investigation of a crime?
There's 2 parts. Normally, I would say yes, but I do think it's appropriate to be able to utilize this. For example, you have a missing elderly person. Those alerts go into the Colorado database. And for example, like if you have someone who has Alzheimer's, who's in a vehicle, who's missing, and we can't locate them, they can be put in the crime data center. Those information comes back as alerts through that system to us to help us locate lost individuals. So I think it's important to not limit it solely to criminal incidents, but beyond, I would say, juveniles, so runaways who are in a vehicle, they can be added to that system. The example of like the elder alerts, there's some other alerts that are the statewide crime data center will put in there. They're very minimal if it's non-criminal. So the majority, to your point, are for criminal violations.
I think I'm okay with that in principle, especially where it's more like a flag if there's a hit.
That's correct.
Right? I think what I struggle with is if someone has the ability to go in and type in my license plate and for whatever reason and just see everywhere that I've been, that feels like an invasion of privacy to me.
Yeah, and that would be.
Even if I specifically am not suspected of a crime or.
Yeah, and that would be a violation of our policy. Our policy is very strict that any of the law enforcement tools that we have, because we have access to a lot of different databases, can only strictly be used for law enforcement purposes. So just a staff member adding yours to see, adding mine, any citizens that's not involved in a specific incident is unacceptable, and that person would be held accountable.
How do we make sure that that's not a policy that can be changed?
Well, I am the only person that can change our policies. And so I would have to authorize that, and I would not do that. The second piece of that is also that we will be auditing our system regularly. We have a coordinator and a co-coordinator who are subject matter experts for us in the department, and they will be auditing it to make sure that it's being used in compliance.
Good?
Yeah, it's a lot to think about.
Yeah,
but,
Yes.
I know, I was going to say, Bill, if you, police chief has answered quite well, but it is something council could pass an ordinance as necessary to say this can never be used this way, or this will only be used in these circumstances, or something like that. I'm not saying I need to not trust you or anything like that, but, you know, if you wanted to find a way to take it further, it does seem like it's a changing technology, and it would constantly be changed, but you know, and need to be updated. But I think as long as we really have our finger on the what's happening here and are paying close attention, but the privacy concerns are real. I don't doubt that for anyone.
Yeah, I think that is concerning. I do want to note that sometimes I think there's a misperception about Fourth Amendment rights on public roadway. And while it feels uncomfortable, none of us have an expectation of privacy when we're out on public roadways. And so, that doesn't mean that feels good. But it's just, it is the reality of the environment and the rules of the road, basically.
I have a few thoughts on that, too. As in law enforcement, most of our systems, especially the state-run systems, as a user, you have to submit to an agreement. We certainly could make it part of the policy that each officer that has access to the system expressly signs an acknowledgement that they're not to use it for any other purposes. If they violate that, then to Kim's point, it's a policy violation and probably could lead to termination in those cases. You know, I don't think we ever have a situation where we can 100% guarantee nobody will ever use it for malicious purposes. What we can do is set up our policies and our systems and really advise our officers that have access to this of the consequences of using it outside of the authorized terms. And realistically, I think that's the best we can do on our end to try and stop it. I will say that, you know, I think there would also, if they were using it for malicious purposes and it led to something like a stalking situation, or like where somebody was using it to try and follow somebody, that would lead to criminal, probably, responses. And so I do think that there are consequences that would come to using it for all of the reasons that you've mentioned here today that would be considered a violation of privacy. And I think we can try to, in our HR world and in our employment documents, set up some expectations, just to be very clear about that. I think they already are, but.
Yeah, we have a very, very strict policy on this already. Every employee has to go through training to be able to utilize the system. Every employee has to acknowledge through our policy management system that they've received the policy and that they acknowledge the policy. And so, and like I said, we have access to so many databases that have such sensitive information in it that the team is very well aware, and not only can they be held accountable here at the local level, it's against the state statute to access criminal justice records inappropriately. So in addition to losing your job, you could also be charged criminally.
Thank you. John, you had a comment or question?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I think, you know, privacy concerns are very real, and every digital database that we use can be hacked. So those are big concerns to me, as well as the growth of AI and other bad actor concerns. But I really appreciate the examples of local successes that you put up on the screen. I think every one of them, I know what they refer to, and I'm just grateful that these were all wrapped up sooner with this technology than they would have been, and they could have all turned out much worse.
Thank you.
Had we not had this technology.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Christine, any comments?
Just thanks. I know this has become a broader community issue, so thanks for addressing the concerns from residents and some of us at the table. And support whatever the stronger policies or frameworks that we can put in place to make sure that this is only in place to be doing the things we want it to, which is preventing or stopping crime and not violating privacy for any members of our community.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for that update. That's really
Thank
great.
you. Appreciate all your support.
Thanks, Chief.
Good afternoon, Mayor Richards and the City Council. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. Today, we're here to discuss bicycle safety priorities for 2026 and how the Police Department and the Parks and Open Space Department are working collaboratively to improve safety across both roadways and trail systems. Before we begin, we'll go around and introduce ourselves. My name is Richie Zah. I'm the Acting Division Chief of Operations.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Jenna Gordon. I'm the Accreditation and Community Response Manager.
Thank you.
All right. So Aspen as a bike community. Aspen has always been a bike-centric community. People ride here for recreation, commuting, fitness, and tourism. Biking is truly a way of life here, and that popularity is something we celebrate. At the same time, it means we have a wide range of users, experience levels, and increasingly different types of bikes, all sharing the same spaces. In response to that growth, the city has in recent years adopted a coordinated multi-department approach known as Street Smart. This effort brings together police, parks and open space, engineering, and communications to address bicycle safety through a balanced focus on safety, education, use, and infrastructure. What we're presenting today builds directly on that framework that is also being continued through several efforts with other departments across the city. The police department has supported Street Smart in several ways, beginning with outreach. Outreach remains foundational to safety, and our approach has been intentionally multifaceted, ranging from foot and bike patrols to engagement at special events, to day-to-day interactions driven by calls for service. These efforts help set expectations and encourage voluntary compliance, particularly during high-use seasons. Education naturally complements outreach. We've engaged in pop-up speed and etiquette education with Parks and Open Space. We've published guidance for school communities on the different classes of e-bikes and supported education through everyday contacts in the field. More recently, we've expanded into regional and collaborative efforts, including participation in the Slow and Say Hello multimodal initiative and representation at the Western Slope e-bike panel in Glenwood Springs, as seen above with Parks and Open Space again and Officer Lee Malik. These regional efforts are increasingly important given how many riders or visitors are traveling between communities. To balance outreach and education, enforcement remains a necessary component. Over time, we've refined enforcement strategies to better incorporate data, evolving travel behaviors and technology, while also clarifying departmental roles. Our focus continues to be visibility, consistency, and applying resources where risk is highest. As such, from our efforts with Street Smart, we've been able to amass data that has become central to how we're approaching 2026. So overall, traffic collisions in Aspen are trending downwards, as you can see in the charts above. However, bicycle and pedestrian crashes, while a relatively small portion of total crashes, results in injuries at a much higher rate. This tells us two important things. First, these crashes are infrequent. And second, when they do occur, the consequences are significant. Any questions on the data can be addressed by Jenna here at the end of the presentation. So with that, based on that data, we're proposing 3 enforcement focus areas for 2026. Data-driven deployment, roadway-focused enforcement, visible risk-based accountability. I'll briefly walk through each of these. Number 1, data-driven deployment. Rather than applying enforcement evenly across all locations, we want to be intentional with how we use our resources. This means assigning or repurposing officers based on collision data and community feedback, allowing us to focus bicycle and e-bike enforcement efforts where issues are actually occurring. Number 2, roadway-focused enforcement. Collision data shows that the most serious bicycle crashes occur on roadways and involve motor vehicles. Based on that, police enforcement will prioritize roadways, intersections, and high-conflict street locations. At the same time, Parks and Open Space will continue leading enforcement and compliance efforts on trail systems consistent with their role and presence. This clear division allows each department to focus where they are most effective and purpose-driven. And finally, visible risk-based accountability. Our enforcement approach emphasizes visibility and corrective engagement first. When fault is identified, accountability measures are used to reinforce safe behavior, with formal enforcement reserved for higher-risk roadway-based behaviors. The goal is behavior change, reducing repeat violations and preventing serious injuries. To support these enforcement tactics, we've also identified the need to innovate with additional tools, specifically alternative enforcement platforms that complement rather than replace traditional patrol vehicles. Fully equipped patrol vehicles remain essential to our core operations, particularly given the amount of emergency and response equipment officers must carry each day. Those vehicles are critical for call response, preparedness, and officer safety. At the same time, smaller and more maneuverable platforms can enhance visibility and access in certain roadway environments where traditional vehicles are less effective, particularly in areas with high bicycle activity and increasing e-bike speeds. Used strategically, these alternative platforms allow us to right-size our response by matching the tool to the environment, improving safety for both officers and the public. As an example, I want to take you briefly back through Aspen's history. Our community has long been known for thinking differently and creatively when it comes to public safety tools, including past investments in unique police vehicles like the Saabs. Against that backdrop, considering alternative enforcement platforms to support bicycle safety is not out of the question. You can see a similar approach with the Aspen Fire Protection District's investment in the Polaris off-highway vehicle shown here, which was selected to match their operational environment. To help illustrate this concept, you can see a mock example of what a motorcycle with a sidecar option could look like using Sergeant Rob Fabricini and Corporal Josh Bennett. In a perfect world, Chief would also love a helicopter, but we can revisit that at a later time. To reiterate.
No horse, though?
To reiterate, smaller purpose-built platforms can provide a reduced footprint, increased maneuverability, and improved visibility, which can enhance safety for both officers and the public when used alongside our traditional patrol vehicles. Now, you might be asking, why don't we rely on our current police e-bikes? It's important to know that while e-bikes are a valuable tool, they're not always sufficient for safely catching or engaging bicyclists committing the most egregious violations we are seeking to hold accountable. So with the right tools in place, we also rely on technology as an important way to further enhance those tools and support effective enforcement. Technology has become a key component of our approach, allowing officers to work more efficiently, accurately, and safely. We've already implemented mobile ticketing and LiDAR technology with traditional patrol vehicles, improving professionalism, documentation, and data capture. As we look to 2026, we're evaluating how to extend these same technological capabilities to smaller, more mobile enforcement platforms so officers have consistent tools regardless of vehicle type. Leveraging technology in this way supports accountability, improves data quality, and helps ensure enforcement efforts are aligned with safety outcomes rather than volume. Finally, in parallel, we'll continue supporting safety through partnerships with local bike shops and coordinated social media outreach. These efforts reinforce consistent messaging and support a shared responsibility culture. complementing enforcement rather than replacing it. And so in closing, our efforts on bicycle safety priorities in 2026 is about alignment, aligning data, resources, and departmental roles to improve public safety. Thank you for your time. We'll now transition to Parks and Open Space Department's presentation and collectively answer any questions you might have at the end.
Okay. Thank you, Richie.
Thanks.
Nice job, Richie. Covered everything. I think we can just move to the conversation. Hi, everybody. I'm Matt Kuhn. I'm Parks and Open Space Director. I'm joined here with, go ahead.
I'm Simon Longacre, the Senior Park Ranger for the City of Aspen.
And Brian Long, Trail System Manager for the City of Aspen.
While Brian's getting the presentation up for the Parks and Open Space side, I just wanted to highlight something that Richie mentioned at the start, is that this really has been a collective and city-wide effort. Parks and Open Space has been involved with bicycle safety, community safety in general on our trails, parks, and open spaces for, gosh, over 20 years, since Brian Long was much younger than he is now. We really have prided ourselves in that collaboration with engineering, and we're at a really great spot with joining our police department, and I think, as Richie highlighted, finding the best places to draw these natural lines. And so with that said, Brian's presentation is going to really hone in on what we do in Parks and Open Space and where we're heading into the next year. So I'll hand it off to Brian.
Our wonderful City of Aspen trail system. As we talk about bicycle conflict and e-bikes in particular, a lot of the conflict that we're going to be looking at takes place in the purple lines on this map, which are the paved trails, the multi-use trails. While Aspen owns a fair bit of single-track hiking and mountain biking trails, we own the beginnings of a lot of trails, and we're sort of little brother in the room to the Forest Service in Pickens County in that realm. But the purple lines you see on this map are roughly 11 miles of the paved multi-use trail in our city that we find important for a number of reasons. In inheriting this system, I stand on the shoulders of the councils before you and the open space program over decades and the trail system managers before me that have created this great system beloved by locals and visitors. We were just re-awarded gold level bicycle friendly community by the League of American Cyclists.
Nice.
Just a couple months ago. I wanted to share that publicly for the first time here tonight. As an example of how much this trail system is loved, we had 139 users counted at the Meroldt Bridge infrared counter just in 2025 alone, and that's just one spot around the system. The mode share of cyclists and pedestrians in Aspen is estimated around 8 or 9%, which is an enormous transportation mode share compared to almost any other community. In 2022, your previous council aligned with the state of Colorado on e-bike policy and passed a slate of codes on trails and helped empower our rangers and police to do better at getting bicycle behavior in line. And in the end, our system is a really effective alternative transportation network, in addition to being a place to reach nature and get an escape and recreation. This photograph of the Hopkins Ped Bikeway shows how well loved the travel into town on our trail system and bikeways are. To keep that spirit healthy and keep everyone in the right mode of behavior, we do a lot of outreach together with the police. The rangers do pop-up speed and etiquette education events out on the trail system. These are very visible events at selected locations around the system to try to get across the message of trail etiquette concepts, announcing as you pass other users. I believe that to be the foundation of trail etiquette and trail behavior. If you can embrace announcing, you can empathize with the other people you're sharing the trail with, and you can respect their experiences. We also talk about speed and how that plays into interactions with other trail users. And of course, we listen and hear feedback from the folks that we meet out there at these events. For years, the Parks Department has been giving away bike bells at our Cemetery Lane location. We will continue that now that we're moved back in there. That's all to get that announcing happening, whether it's by voice or by bell. In addition to these things, in that Street Smart campaign, we do the print ads. We do radio ads on trail etiquette. You may have heard me on K-Snow talking about trails or moose or other things that are of concern to the Open Space Department. And we partner with the police and transportation and engineering at Bike to Work Day and the school bike rodeo, where we try and impress upon the children the virtues of trail etiquette and bike safety. As was mentioned before, the Slow and Say Hello campaign, the Street Smart campaign has sort of outgrown itself and been transformed into this regional effort to spread the word of announcing, spread the word of slowing down and staying in control. And this goes out to cyclists, to pedestrians, to equestrians, to motorists. It's a multifaceted program that we're really excited to be launching this year. And the communities up and down the valley are getting on board, and we're really reaching the broader regional community with this one. On the heels of the code changes in 2022, we posted speed limits around the trail system. Most of Aspen has a 15-mile-per-hour trail speed limit. Some congested areas, like right across the street here at Rio Grande Park, Bugsy Barnard Park, and across the Castle Creek Bridge coming into town, we have a 10-mile-per-hour speed limit that's more appropriate for those areas. And we do have a single 20-mile-per-hour trail out there, Lumberyard, Mountain Rescue, that stretch of ABC Trail. We have a radar speed feedback trailer that we move around the system to show users their speed and make awareness of that more evident as we move that thing around town. Just in the park the other day, I took this photo. The police had deployed the variable message trailer to give this message in Bugsy Barnard Park, which is, again, one of those areas where we emphasize that slower speed limit. So with all of this in place, what's the problem? What we see a lot is conflict or perceived conflict among legal users on the trail, people on foot, people on bikes or e-bikes that are allowed to be on the trail. And we also see, of course, illegal or dangerous devices or behavior that should not be on the trail. The trail experience delta is a theorem Simon developed, where you have a person who may be out there for a peaceful, immersive nature walk, and maybe here you've got a person who is out there getting across town efficiently on their e-bike and has the headphones on and is not announcing and going too fast. The delta between those folks is that drama. It causes that conflict. When we talk to these folks, we want to try to get the immersive nature walk person to, when they're on a multi-use trail in commuting hours, have a little more situational awareness and an expectation that they're going to be on a trail that is used and is popular. That can reduce their drama and bring that delta down. And similarly, the person traveling on e-bikes gets the education that speed needs to be brought down when you're overtaking other trail users, and that you need to announce, and it's a lot of times because there's a lot of people on the trail. But from someone who's been up here doing it for 19 years, it feels good every time that you announce and the person puts the little finger up or says thank you. That's the only way. On the illegal side, we have items like this. I want to be sure council and the public knows that there is a difference between e-bikes and what are being classified as e-motos. These are beyond the 750 watt limit that the state draws the line at for calling something an e-bike. These devices can be 2,000, 4,000, 8,000 watts of power. They are motorcycles, and they're becoming quite popular, and we're going to see and hear more about e-motos, and I want to be sure that council knows and is aware of the hard line that is drawn at 750 watts on devices being allowed on the trail system. Furthermore, these things would have to have turn signals and registration and a motorcycle endorsement to be allowed on the street system. So when these are purchased locally, it's a bit quizzical what someone intends to do with them. I will include this slide in your follow-up packet. Do not try to take this all in, but this is a matrix I've drawn up with the help of the Parks team to sort of quantify all the different items and elements that we combine to do the speed control, the outreach, trail design, and enforcement as go around the system. In the upper left, the objectives are increased safety, improved user experience, widespread etiquette awareness, and more and better bike and pedestrian infrastructure. On the enforcement side, to make all this real out there, the rangers have been out there doing contacts and addressing issues they find on the trail system. Among the codes that were passed in 2022, we have the classes of e-bikes that are allowed on Aspen's paved trails, class 1, 2, and 3. Those are all under 750 watts. Other powered devices are allowed on Aspen's trail system. That includes one-wheels, powered skateboards, small powered scooters. These are limited to 65 pounds in mass and 750 watts also. We require education and training video for customers of rental e-bikes in Aspen. Folks should be heading out the door of the rental shops with that nugget of trail etiquette and street smarts already trained into them by the rental shop staff. And we visit those shops each spring to refresh that relationship and make sure that message is getting delivered. We require announcing on the trails, not just as an etiquette, but it is the law in Aspen to announce as you pass folks on the trails. We require lights at night on the city's trail system, and there are codes limiting speed to safe speeds and requiring obedience of posted speed limit on the trail system. There's also a code that prohibits careless operating of bicycles or other devices on the trail system. Out there enforcing, the rangers' priorities are somewhat in this order, that 750 watt limitation, finding those e-motos that might be getting on the trail system and making sure they are contacted and dealt with. The trail speed limits, the rangers are looking out for egregious violators of the trail speed limits. We do some enforcing of announcing on the trail system. It's difficult and a bit awkward, but we've made it happen a few times. And we're always out there pushing that safe cycling behavior on the street and the trail. For years, this was the typical motor vehicle on trail enforcement. An encounter like this with something that obviously has a gas motor, makes noise, you can smell it, but more and more, the motor vehicle on trail enforcement is of this. This is one of those e-motos. They have, at this point in time, a pretty distinct appearance from the lower powered e-bikes. They have this sort of wasp-like shape, and it's all built around a giant central battery, but they're not big. They're not as big as a traditional motorcycle, but the power is there, the physics are there, the capability is there. For a few seasons now, the school resource officer has been perusing the bike racks up at the Aspen campus to see what we have out there and assess whether some of these are legal on the trails. These all look kind of like motorcycles, but these are mostly Class 2 e-bikes that would be legal on the trail system, with the exception of one in this row that did have a little bit higher powered motor and was probably going to be contacted. Looking forward to the future, as we think of the design piece in the trail system, some things that we might do to also bring down this drama would be separating uses. This is a pretty big measure, but it's had some success in Europe. We've made some plans in Parks Department to try to create a soft surface trail on alongside the ABC trail, to have a place where folks on that same alignment could walk and have the quieter experience where the busier trail handles most of the traffic. Some places we may want to widen our trails to better accommodate a user overtaking another user with a third user coming the other way. Not all of our trails are wide enough to perfectly accommodate that, but there's also an integrated speed control factor in the fourth item there, where Bugsy Park, for instance, having the trail narrow and windy helps bring that speed down as folks are on their way into town, bringing it down intuitively. And of course, in design of the city's trail system, we're always out to reduce our at-grade crossings. We have a lot of successful underpasses that each one of which has been a big construction effort and a big ticket item, but it reduces those incidents that occur at at-grade crossings. That's the conclusion of my presentation on our efforts to reduce bicycle drama out there on the trails and streets. So are we headed in the right direction?
Bill?
Thanks. Thanks to everyone for the presentation on this. I think there's inherent conflict in the sort of disparate uses, right? And there's only so much you can do. So I wanted to ask a little bit about, you talked about conflict and perceived conflict. How much data do we have on actual conflict, on people actually getting hurt, getting hit? Or is it just, it doesn't feel good, and that experience delta that you talked about?
I think with conflict, that encompasses a lot more than just an incident or an injury. It's someone had their experience harshed.
No, I understand that, and that's what I'm trying to differentiate between.
Yeah.
And the reason I'm asking is, like, is this something that we can live with, or is this something that we really need to make difficult sacrifices on and decisions on? Because we want both, right? We want people to commute on bikes and on e-bikes, and we also want people to have great experiences on trails. So we're all aware of that, of course.
Yep.
I think the data portion of it is what I've gathered from the regional meetings I've attended, is that it's at the forefront of a lot of people's question. I don't think the data is actually there to give us a clear answer. One of the solutions to that, which it seemed like a lot of the other municipalities were on board with, was figuring out where you collect the data. Is it hospital level? Is it at ranger and police level? I think one of the ideas that rose to the forefront was that it's at ambulance level, perhaps. Because at that point, if a call is made, if there's a bike accident, a call is made and the ambulance is dispatched, then you have it has risen to the level that's of severity that there's it's a good idea to get checked, but they might not be transported by the ambulance. But there's plenty of bike accidents that are out there that we might come across or that happen that don't rise to that level. So that would be somewhere that, and the ambulance is always on call, right? 24 hours. You're not missing if the rangers are off, or you're not missing that data set that's maybe off hours. So that's a really good idea that I think we could continue to go with.
I don't know what the right answer is. Sounds like you've put some thought into it, but I encourage all of you to talk about it and come up with some kind of measurement methodology, and I think we need to keep an eye on it, right? Because if it gets to a point of every summer we're having 50 serious injuries as a result of e-bikes on trails, I think we need to treat it differently than this sucks. My hike is being disturbed by somebody whizzing by me who didn't announce. It's two different things, right? It's unpleasant. I'm not saying it's a good thing, but it's different than a public safety issue, a serious public safety issue. All right, and then I have one sort of fun idea. I don't think that there's a lot more that you can do in terms of education and enforcement than what you're already doing. But I'd like you to look into something on the bike bell program to make this something more fun and less nerdy. So like, is there a cool electronic bike bell that like you can have a choice of 10 different fun sounds that you can like play as opposed to ding ding? I don't know. I have no idea if such a thing exists or not, but like, how do we make this something desirable as opposed to undesirable?
It's a great idea.
And actually, if you don't mind, I do want to jump in on that data piece real quick. One of the most useful pieces of information that we have from the police department is looking at that traffic collision data, which we very briefly showed a slide of. And on average, we're seeing bike traffic collisions at about 1% of our total reportable accidents. Unfortunately, that doesn't paint the entire picture, because if you look at that 1%, about 65% of those do result in an injury of a varying degree. So while it's relatively low interaction that we have, last year we had 7 bike collisions within our jurisdiction, and that's specifically interactions with a motor vehicle. Those do have disproportionately high levels of injury rates. And so unfortunately, that one data set doesn't really catch the entire impacts of those.
Yeah, thank you for that. And again, that furthers my point, right? Is like, let's come up with some kind of centralized and agreed upon methodology to measure all sort of e-bike or battery assisted, whatever your sort of all-encompassing term is for all these
Yep.
these vehicles and track it.
And, I do not know the accuracy of this, but at least at the Rafter Board meeting, when some of these citizens have come in to talk about the issues, and really greatly appreciate you participating with the larger system, because that's where, as you've said, the riders come from all over the place, and we can't just educate our population without them all. But that the hospitals don't really track what was the cause of the injury that brought someone to the hospital. They can't tell you, oh, it was a bike-car collision, it was a bike-bike collision, anything like that. And, maybe we can ask Aspen Valley Hospital if they would consider doing that as a partner in helping us understand this better. We're all taxpayers of the Aspen Hospital District, and we pay property tax here. It'd be nice if they could give us a hand in helping keep more people out of the hospital. So that might be worth trying to pursue.
Yeah, the only thing I would think about that is that you're missing a lot of data there below the hospital.
I'm
You know
just
what I
saying that
mean?
would be a chunk.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it would be complete
Yeah, because we
record.
need that nuance, I believe, where these things are happening, specifically, right? Once it gets to that point, a lot of that data could be lost, and, the trail system aspect of it would be really helpful with how we change our designs and where we put in the resources with rangers and police, but yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Other comments from other board members? Questions? Sam, you ready?
I think you guys do an incredible job at this, especially since a lot of this comes down to personal responsibility. So I'm not sure what more you could possibly do. The only other thing I think I would add anecdotally is definitely a lot of the kids on e-bikes, especially in front of the fire station. You see it all the time, the reckless behavior there, especially some of these e-bikes that you say are 750 watts, even the ones that are less. I've seen a lot of them like speed through like the water culverts and crash, or have like multiple kids on the same bike, and some of them you can't even believe the ages that they're like driving something that's like feels like a mini motorcycle. So I don't know if they're what education level they're doing up at the school district, or for middle and high school age kids. I feel like that's just one element that might be could be improved upon, but obviously without a fully developed prefrontal cortex, I don't want to. So like it's tough, but it's one thing to address when it comes to this sort of thing. Otherwise, I do think you guys do the best that you possibly can in this regard, and it comes down to personal responsibility and continuing to spread that information to make sure people are aware what being a good person on a bike looks like.
Right. What a tool to have as a 10-year-old now that just came into your lap. And one of the things that we are emphasizing with my team is for those kids that are out there, it's tough to give them something that they're going to like grasp onto and really care about, right? So something that it allows them to retain the freedom is to, you know, when you're coming in close contact with another user, that's when we expect you guys to bring it down. Otherwise, you know, you can be a kid, but really the conflict comes into play when we're all coming together. And that's kind of like a community idea that we're trying to push this season that they might be able to at least get it. I was like, we got people, we're not gonna get in trouble if we bring it down when there's people around. And there's no people, they're gonna be kids. They're gonna run these, ride these things.
Okay. I think the question was raised before about repeat offenders and a lot of contact, but how often is it repeat offenders every so often, and at what point does it ever rise to the level of a citation? If someone continues to run the red lights or continues to not yield when they really should be yielding on a bike, or their speeds are consistent, are you guys tracking who you contacted in a database so that you can say, okay, we've talked to this kid 4 times now, it's time maybe to call his parents, or we talked to this kid only once, thank you, we hope you're going to really pay attention now?
I'll take that one. So thank you for your question, Mayor. Those are great questions. All those different factors that you mentioned are what we call the totality of the circumstances. So all these varying factors, whether it's they've had multiple contacts prior, we've talked to the kids or the parents, or even how egregious it may be. It may be the first time that we're encountering them, but they've caused an injury. We try and factor that into it so that we're thinking about how we are approaching accountability instead of kind of a one-size-fits-all, because there can be any varying level of history and what may factor into a call for service that we get. So I guess to answer your question, we have records management systems that, for example, on the traffic stops with a vehicle where we can account for warnings, previous tickets, and driver history. So my belief is that we're hoping to utilize a similar system to help us make some good decisions when it comes to accountability outside of any kind of severe call that we might get.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not interested in turning this into a heavy-handed operation, I mean, clearly. But it just seems that if you've had to talk to the same person week after week about not driving on the mall with your bike, regular bike, and just because you only have one foot on one pedal and you're coasting it through, it's more those friendly contacts as opposed to a call for service where you've reminded them repeatedly you really should not do this. At what point are you tracking, that this is the 3rd morning, this is the 5th morning, on individuals? Are you doing that? Or is it just when there's a call for service because there has been an accident?
The city and county rangers have a compliance tracking database for violators of all the codes out on the trails.
Even if they're not getting a ticket, that's fine, but it's just that this is kind of a repeat offender. Okay, I just want to know that, because there was no yes or no on it before.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. John, and then Christine?
Yeah, as a frequent user of the bike trails around town, I would say there's 2 distinct user groups, courteous people and incourteous people. And I think for the most part, people are courteous. They slow down if there's dogs present, children present, pedestrians present. But I've seen a lot of behavior where it seems to be principally happening on higher-powered e-bikes going too fast, and usually headphones are on. And so there's no way they can hear anything that's going on. I guess my main point is just it is rewarding to announce yourself ahead of time and get positive reactions and be a courteous person, because that's really the best tool that we have.
Thanks for all of this work. You've put a lot of thought into solutions around this, and I don't have a lot of feedback. One thought is a lot of this messaging is geared toward the users, the bikers, and I wonder if we're a bike-friendly community, and so letting drivers know when they come into this community that there are a lot of bikers, and broadening that message just to when you go to Portland, there's bikers everywhere. When you go to Amsterdam, there's bikers everywhere. And so just letting visitors know that that's part of our culture here and that they can be a little bit more alert and embracing of perhaps good bikers and bad bikers. It goes both ways, I think. On that same note, I found the path up to the Maroon Bells, the new demarcation on the green lines and the passing lanes, really helpful. On the Rio Grande, something might be helpful too. As a biker there, I find one of the most troublesome parts is when people are walking four abreast and you're trying to pass on a bike. And so putting pedestrians on the right side so that they know they're being passed, I think and you've addressed that in here, but some of the design, broadening that to other parts and trails in the community could be helpful.
We've been increasing our center line around the system as that very need comes about. Initially, it was, okay, here's a blind corner, let's put a center line in. But having that use and that maybe even subconscious cue that you should be walking or biking on the right, I think is helpful, and we're increasing that paint.
Yeah, and as an example, I took the kids out to the bike rodeo on Friday, and the class all stayed on the right side because that line from the school was going out to the Merle open space. So the kids, I don't know, they're little, but they knew to stay on that side and avoid the left side. So subconsciously, it's working.
Yeah, very good. Well, I think it's really great because Bill knows, and as RAFTA reps, we've been really pushing RAFTA to try to create more of a regional task force on this. I'm sure you've been participating with that, so that, you know, whether you rent your bike in Basalt, Carbondale, Glenwood, Aspen, Snowmass, you're all getting that same message. And your help here in our town really helps the Rio Grande Trail. And that's a difficult one between the management with Picken County and then RAFTA. And you know, they're kind of a bus agency. They have a lot of easement issues they have to deal with all the time, but they're coming up to the same speed that you are. And just the assistance and the shared knowledge between the agencies that manage that one community asset is huge, and really appreciate that. So if there's no other questions, we might be able to let these guys go.
Let's let them go.
Okay, let's let them go. Thank you, Kim. Thank you, everyone, for being here, Matt.
Thank you all.
We really appreciate your time. I would ask two questions. One is about that potential site visit.
That's the same thing I was going to bring up.
Yeah, okay, well, we'll let you do the asking then, Pete.
Yeah, so there was a request to have a site visit for the boutique lodge on Main Street that you all heard about a few weeks back. We were targeting June 1st as that potential site visit, and just wanted to make sure council was okay with either a 3:30 site visit, which would be right before the 4 o'clock start of our regular work session, or if we bumped everything up to starting at 4 o'clock, we might have to go a little bit longer at the end. We have an executive session and the work session
Cozy
item.
Point.
The work session item was an update on Cozy Point Ranch.
And we're doing an executive session on June 1st.
So there's a site visit, then there's Cozy Point Ranch update, and then an executive session.
It's held pursuant to a special meeting, to your point.
I'd rather start early, personally.
At 3:30?
3:30?
Okay.
Okay,
Well,
we'll
we just-
advertise for 3:30 on that.
Okay, we'll make
Do
that
you mind having a calendar invite sent out on that?
Yes, sir.
great. Thank you for that. Is that the only other thing? Just take a look at the consent calendar carefully for tomorrow night's regular meeting. Appreciate you guys understanding. I'm a little yawning, tired today, but I'm catching up. Can't remember what else it was. I'll figure it out, and we'll bring it up at the next meeting. After retreat date coming up. Okay.
Oh, yeah, I did set out a second survey if you have a chance to do that, and if you didn't do the first one, you still have like an hour or so.
An hour.
Otherwise, I think we're all set for the pre-meeting survey as well that Tika sent out, so appreciate all your feedback.
Okay.
The last one. Okay.
All right. Very good. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Grassroots TV. We appreciate you being here. you.